So I have been in a very Metroid mood lately, and I've been playing through all of the 2D Metroids, so I want to tell you guys about why I love Metroid so much. I first got into Metroid around 2002 when Fusion and Prime came out. Before, I only knew Samus from Super Smash Bros., and I had no idea about the Metroid franchise. But when I first played Prime and Fusion, I was really invested in them. I didn't beat the games until a year or two later after I got them, though. I would tend to get stuck in video games a lot as a kid and as a teenager, but I was very impressed with the atmosphere of Metroid Prime especially, since you're just on this planet, isolated, and it's just this really weird alien world, and you're going through all these different environments and very weird creatures, and learning about the lore of the planet and everything. It's really fantastic. I can only imagine what it was like for people that played Super Metroid before and going to Metroid Prime and seeing the 3D transition. There will always be people that don't like that Metroid went into a first-person view game, but for me, I had Prime and Fusion as my first time experiencing this franchise, so I got both styles. And I loved both styles pretty equally. But both Fusion and Prime did have the progression aspect of Samus becoming stronger until the end of the game, which I do like about the franchise. And it's what got me into other Metroidvania-type games like the Shantae series. Though I'm into Shantae for other reasons too. And another thing I love about Metroid, even though some argue it's probably a weaker part of the series, is actually the story. It's one of the few Nintendo franchises that actually has a timeline that actually makes sense. Even from the very beginning, Metroid, Metroid 2, Super Metroid, and Metroid Fusion are all Metroid 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then the Metroid Prime series is all between 1 and 2. And then Other M is supposed to be after Super Metroid. And even though Other M does have the most story out of all of the games, it's not really well written. I would rather the story be told in sort of the background of the game itself. Or integrated in a way that it was in Fusion, because I do like the way that they did it in Fusion. And I just got done rereading the manga that came out around when Zero Mission came out. And that talks more about Samus' backstory, and the backstory of the Chozo, the Metroid, the Space Pirates. And while the manga isn't perfect, it's a lot better than what Other M did. And recently, the producer of the Castlevania series on Netflix says that he wants to do a Metroid adaptation. And I would love that if they did it like the manga, and that would be awesome. Some people may look at Metroid as this generic sci-fi game series, but I see it as a lot more unique than that. And even though it does have a lot of influence from the Alien franchise, it really is uniquely its own thing. And really, the games are just fun. It's really fun to explore and find different upgrades, and by the end of each game, you feel very powerful. I love the designs of the enemies and the bosses in the games, and one thing I do really love about the series is the music. Samus is just this lone bounty hunter on this planet trying to get to her end goal, and the music complements that so very well, and each area very well too. Like when I first entered Phendrana Drifts in Metroid Prime, the music is so perfect for that area. And the way Super Metroid uses its music is fantastic. Everything's just so very atmospheric and brooding. And the music is triumphant when it needs to be, like in Zero Mission at the end when you get your fully powered suit. And all of the weapons of the games are very satisfying to use. Like when you finally get the screw attack, you can just mow through enemies by somersaulting them. Samus truly has one of the best weapon sets out of any video game character. So yeah, I really like Metroid, and it's my favorite Nintendo franchise and probably my favorite video game franchise ever. I was really into it after I beat Fusion and Prime, and I got into stuff like Metroid Metal from Stemage, and there was this Sprite webcomic that I would read called Planet Zebeth, and apparently it's still going on to this day. And after they announced Metroid Prime 4 and Samus Returns, I just wanted to revisit a lot of the games, and that's what I've been doing lately. So I played through all of the 2D Metroids, and it was actually my first time playing through Metroid 1 and 2. So at the end of the video here, I'm going to go over my ranking of the 2D Metroids. Number 5 is Metroid 1. It's very dated, it's really hard to go through without a map, because there are locations in Metroid 1 that look exactly the same. The bosses aren't that hard, Kraid is sort of a pushover, Ridley is fine if you just like get under him, under the lava, and just take damage and just shoot at him. But Mother Brain is a little bit challenging with all the stuff flying at you. You could probably get through it without a map, but I would highly recommend using one. At number 4, I'll put Metroid 2 Return of Samus. This one does improve slightly on the original Metroid. You can actually shoot down in this one. There's also a lot of upgrades that started in Metroid 2 that I didn't realize started in Metroid 2. The game is also a lot more linear than I thought it would be. In each area, you just have to defeat the Metroids, and then the next area will open up. You just gotta be careful not to get lost in previous areas. The only really hard boss in this is the Metroid Queen. And the Omega Metroids, I guess, though if you're good at dodging, you can easily take them out. But for the Metroid Queen, if you can get into her stomach with the Morph Ball, you can just bomb her stomach, and that'll be easy. At number 3, I have Metroid Fusion. Fusion adds a couple more improvements from the previous games. For example, on the map, if there's a circle, that means an item is there that you haven't gotten yet, and when it's a dot, you've gotten it. Whereas in Super Metroid, it would just be a dot and you wouldn't know if you got it or not. Also, Fusion added the power grip where you can actually grab onto ledges, and that makes climbing vertical areas a lot easier, as well as getting into morph ball slots and walls. And I gotta say, after playing all these games back to back, Fusion probably has the hardest bosses. As a kid, I was stuck on that spider boss for a very long time, and after that, I was stuck on Nightmare, and then I was stuck on the final boss with SAX. I did eventually beat it though when I was a kid, or a teenager. I do like the story that they added in with Fusion, but the game feels a lot more linear than the other ones. Then at number 2, I have Zero Mission. This is a remake of the original Metroid, though they add in a lot of stuff. They add in that map feature that I talked about with Fusion, as well as the power grip. And actually, now that I think about it, the map wasn't even in the original Metroid, so having a map is really great. It's not quite as linear as Fusion, though it is still pretty linear. I would recommend Zero Mission to those wanting to get into Metroid because it's probably the easiest and most accessible out of all of them. And it shows a bit of Samus's backstory since this did come out with a manga. Then at number 1, it's probably no surprise, it's Super Metroid. Super Metroid feels like the complete package when it comes to Metroid. Where the previous titles had a lot of the power-ups that you're familiar with Metroid, Super Metroid has like all of them, with the exception of the spider ball that is in Metroid 2. In this one you have all the suits, the grapple beam, the X-ray scope, and I think this game has the right amount of challenge. I don't think any of the bosses are incredibly difficult, with the exception of Ridley. Ridley has some attacks that are pretty hard to avoid, but if you know what you're doing, you can beat him. Or you can exploit the murder beam glitch and just do that and kill him instantly. I didn't play Super Metroid until after it was on the Virtual Console on the Wii, but after playing it back then, I understood why people like it so much. And it's become one of my favorite Metroid games, as well as one of my favorite games of all time. So now that I've replayed through all of the 2D Metroids, now I'm going to replay through the Metroid Prime trilogy. It's been quite a while since I've played through these. I think the last time I played through them was 2010. So yeah, I'm excited to play through them again, and I think I'm actually going to stream them on my Twitch channel. So if you're interested in watching me play them, I'll link my Twitch channel below. I'll figure out which dates I'm actually going to stream it, so follow me on Twitter for updates. So that was a video of me talking about Metroid and why I love Metroid and ranking the 2D Metroids, and I guess just gushing about Metroid. So if you love the Metroid franchise as much as I do, tell me down in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Well, by now we're getting a bit used to winter. We're like soldiers in the middle of a campaign, growing hardened to discomfort and better able to